Hello and welcome to the Comedian's Paradise. This is the podcast where we speak to mavericks across the comedy and clown world. Now, today's guest, how can I describe him? He is a man, and he's corrected me in this, lieutenant. He was a lieutenant in the Royal Navy for, I believe, over 20 years. And he is a comedian. He's been through a wild range of adventures. We can say he is a man that's doing a lot for the British Armed Services as he's setting up Project Comedy, which, if I'm correct, and I've done it all correctly, is an organization that helps uh, people in the armed services recover from PTSD and deal with their mental health and help them better themselves once they finish the armed services. But yeah, without further ado, welcome the brilliant man, the man that's doing a lot for the armed services, Jay Saunders.
Thank you very much, mate. And I've got to correct you yet again. I wasn't a lieutenant. I was a lieutenant for a while, but I ended up leaving the service as a lieutenant commander. So for those the other services, that's the equivalent rank of a major or a squadron leader. That's how when I was medically discharged, that was the rank I had attained.
Okay. And with the British Armed Services, there's different divisions. There's the Air Force, there's the Navy, and there's, of course, like the foot soldiers of the army. How do they, like, without sounding stupid and dumb, but how are they different, and like how do they work together in a lot of operations? And I know that, like, there's this thing that I watched a while ago. The SAS is world famous because of what happened in the embassy many years ago. But yeah, how do they all cooperate with each other?
So we've each got our primary domain. So obviously, British Army, you think of foot soldiers, you think of tanks, you think of artillery and what have you. That is fighting across the plains. Royal Navy, we fight at sea and we fight in the air as well. The Royal Air Force is predominantly fighting in the air, but also logistical transit between. But the main thing is, since I joined the service, I signed up at the tender age of 27 back in 96. I ended up joining. And all three services have to work intricately with each other. I mean, my career is a prime example of that. Albeit I was a sailor, I spent 18 years of my career working with the British Army. I spent more time commanding soldiers on the ground than I ever did sailors at sea. We have to be able to integrate so we become an effective fighting military and peacekeeping force.
Okay. Now, I mean, it's many years ago. I think it was like especially during the Second World War and before that, the British Armed Services were known for having the best naval service in the world. But I know that since then it's fallen down quite a lot. But
I don't know.
Compared to what it was.
The number of ships we've got is far fewer. And of course, that's because when we were fighting the Second World War, effectively, we still had an empire. We're now just an island nation as part of the Commonwealth. But the actual ships and equipment we've got in the Royal Navy, we punch well above our weight. Many of the nations I've served with, including the Americans, will turn around and look at our kit going, number one, I wish I had that kit. But more importantly, they wish we had our personnel. Our personnel are higher than any other nation I've ever served with.
Really? Better than Russia and all of those, like...
Our people know how to fight. They know how to work. They know how to keep peace. But equally, they're capable of doing more than one job at one time. And when I've worked with the Americans, the Canadians, the French, the Dutch, the first thing that impressed them is the quality of our personnel in the British Armed Forces.
And what about with China?
Well, thankfully, I never had to work with China or fight them, so I really couldn't answer that.
Sorry. But it's no, I know nothing about the armed services. I mean, the only thing I know about is I had a guest on here called Jonathan Rowlands, who served in the American military, and he's a comedian in Sweden, and he says that the military discipline from working the armed services, and I learned about hazing. He says that really equipped him for a successful career in comedy, the military discipline. I know here from Jim Halworth, who used to be in the armed services, how being in the military really helped him with his being a comedy
In
writer.
many ways, it's a great age. Sometimes it's a barrier. I mean, let's take people. It's one of my favorite gangs from when I was a youth. People would sooner, their biggest fear in life is public speaking. They'd sooner be in the coffin than give the eulogy about the person in the coffin. It's one of those British fears. Being former services, we were trained feel the fear and do it anyway. Way. So, to get on the stage the first time, it was feeling the fear and do it anyway. But actually, as a comedian on the circuit, yeah, it really helps in the fact of number one, I always turn up on time and I'll always help the booker. I'll always help the promoter. I'm always early. That's military trained into me. And I want to make the mission succeed. So I'll help out and I'll help set up speakers, and move chairs around and things like that. Secondly, if I get a heckler, what are you going to do? Stab me? Try it, sunshine. It's if you want to heckle me, be aware. I've got complex PTSD. I might jump into the front row and have you. No, it enables you to keep a distance from a perceived enemy. So yeah, various parts of my military training really aid me being on the stage and doing what I'm doing.
Okay. It is now with the armed services and all that, there's so much stuff going on now, isn't there, in the world? And like,
Yeah.
are they appreciated as much, do you feel? Because I know that I watch a few programs and they say there's a lot of camaraderie and like the
Yeah.
relationships you build with a lot of your teammates is massive. But I also heard, there's a lot of bullying as well, and a lot of people get mentally destroyed. That these are things I heard and I know nothing. I'm just a curious observer.
I'm very proud to say, so I did 23 years in the military before I was discharged. Did I ever see bullying? Did I ever see elements like that? Of course I freaking did. The bit I adore about my 23 year services is when we spotted it, we put an end to it fast. It doesn't breed cohesive troops. It doesn't breed an effective fighting force. It's counterproductive. So if it happens, we nail it. But it's also the fact that we end up working so tightly together. The camaraderie, the banter, and what have you. So the banter is a big thing. We will take the mickey out of each other massively. Every day is a roast battle when you serve in the services, especially if you've got a soldier, a sailor, and airman in the same room. We are going to slag each other off massively. And sometimes feelings will get tiny hurt, but we know we don't freaking mean it. Because when it comes to it, when our backs are to the wall, we're all going to fight together because there's only one enemy in conflict, and that is the enemy, not the guys standing left and right of you.
Is there a thing called, I watched the program as well, where they did a bit of soft boxing, if there's a bit of aggression between each other for people to get their
Milling,
heads right?
milling,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the one.
Sometimes
Yeah.
milling sometimes is sometimes you are so pent up. What you need to do is get it out physically. So we're going to take it out physically in the right way, where somebody's not going to get hurt. You can train that aggression into becoming more controlled and realize I didn't need to be here in the first place. So sometimes, yeah, milling is a very effective tool for if you're talking about infantryers, Royal Marines, what have you. Yeah, sometimes we just need to let it out, but we let it out in a controlled manner.
Okay. And like this, so you've been in the military for a long time, and what was like the thing that made you become a member of the armed services? And look, what was the moment that made you decide to become a comedian?
So to join the forces, that was a lifelong dream. My father, he was national service. My grandfather fought in the First World War. So I'd known what service was all my life. But had both been army. They had both been non-commissioned in the Royal Engineers. And my first holiday to Cornwall, we went over the Tamar and I saw Royal Navy warships. And I went, that's what I want to be part of. It was this thing of you go out there you do stuff to protect people. That's the function of the military. Yes, we will use extreme violence, but the function of a military is to protect people. So you hear the stories of Korea, First World War, Second World War, Falklands, etc., etc. We were there doing nasty things to make sure people kept safe. And I find that so honourable. That's what led me to service. Originally, I was just going to join up as a junior rate, but I ended up getting more and more of an education. It turned out I had an ability at science and engineering. So I was the first member of my family to go past 16 years of age. I ended up getting a degree. I ended up becoming a qualified engineer, and I joined the services as an engineering officer in the Royal Navy. That's what led me in. And then my experience in the service, that took me into working with the British Army and seeing what they did on the ground. I did lots of humanitarian aid. I did a few covert operations. That's different to being special forces. But I did a few covert operations and what have you. And I actually genuinely saw the good that the British services can actually bring to the world. There's not a single mission I was deployed on that I didn't go, yeah, we're here for exactly the right reason.
Yeah. And I heard this from an American comedian who was also a soldier. He said that sometimes of the missions that are going ahead, they weren't too fussed about that, but they were like, when you were all worried about protecting your teammates more than anything else. Like that,
Absolutely.
like you.
Absolutely. That's the way you're trained. Um, you don't want a soldier thinking about geopolitical stuff and what's happening in the White House or what's happening in the palaces of Westminster. You're on the ground doing a mission. The only people you care about are the guys left and right of you, because the guys left and right of you are looking after you. There is the mission and your team. That's what enables you to get through things.
Okay. And how so what was the moment that made you become a comedian and set up Project Comedy? We did chat about this before the podcast, but
Yeah.
yeah, for anyone that's
Yeah. So
hearing now.
I ended up being medically discharged with complex post-traumatic stress disorder and moral injury syndrome. And bizarrely, for most service personnel, mine didn't actually come from combat. Combat wasn't a problem. I was trained to do it. I knew how to handle it. My final operational tour was what was called Operation Gridlock. I was sent out to Sierra Leone to try and eradicate the Ebola virus. And I was not trained for that, and I was not trained to see what I saw out there. We called it the zombie apocalypse. I was literally watching these beautiful people dissolve from the inside out. The fatality rate when I arrived in Kona. So if you've ever seen the movie Blood Diamond, that is where I was based. That is where I was based. I was based in Kona. The fatality rate was 100%. Anybody with a virus would die the most horrific death you can imagine. And we were losing between 300 and 500 people a week. And my brain couldn't cope because I was not saving these people's lives. And it destroyed me, and hence I could no longer command again. That's what happened. So I went through my medical discharge, and then unfortunately, we all went through COVID, and we went into the COVID lockdowns. Now you can imagine going through COVID and the lockdowns, instantly I'm flashing back to everything that happened back in Ebola. I'm constantly reminded every single day of what is happening. And then this beautiful charity out there called Project Recce. Project Recce's mission is to enable veterans to find secure employment in the construction industry. Anything from a labourer all the way to being a chief financial officer of one of the major construction multinationals. The construction industry stopped during COVID, and all these guys were really, really struggling. So they ended up setting up this little well-being course of what we're going to do is we'll do this course online via Zoom and teach stand-up comedy by a beautiful guy called Jay Saunders, if you've ever heard of him. Jay works very closely with Laughing Horse Comedy. He's their main tutor. We did the course. I had no interest in getting on the stage. And they said, right, the first show we're going to do via Zoom. We're going to do a gig via Zoom. I did it, did my 5-minute set, and I got addicted. I suddenly realized there was a part of myself that was still allowed to be creative. And then Once we came out of lockdown at the end of 2021, I did my first live gig, and I suddenly found a peace in my PTSD and moral injury syndrome I'd not been able to find before. I hate compliments. Most veterans hate compliments, but the
Oh,
one compliment I can take is when somebody laughs at a joke I tell them. And that's why I just went, I'm finding recovery out of this. Turned around to Project Recce and went, I'm willing to lead the team. I've been leading it now for very nearly 6 years. And last year we took 2 shows to the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. We got great audiences and we managed to raise the charity nearly 5 grand at Edinburgh. And
whoa.
anybody that goes to Edinburgh that can make money, that's rare. So something spectacular we did there.
But a lot of, and this is going to be honest and a bit brutal and maybe not nice what I'm going to say here, but uh, you're doing something that's actually meaningful and does a lot for society and people. And people are like, I'm going to go in there because it means a lot and it's a great deal. There's a lot of shows that
Yeah.
go on in Edinburgh where it's all about the vanity, about that comic getting awards or making
Yeah.
themselves.
Yes.
But you're doing something that impacts the world, does something to people, and it deserves everything it gets in a good way.
Yeah, and I think that was the big hook. Whenever we do something with Project Comedy, whenever when we were in Edinburgh, I think that was an amazing hook for people. As number one, we're going to go and have a good laugh. The main thing is everybody that's in Project Comedy is a comedian. That's their only mission is make people laugh. But they can go and have a laugh and support something worthwhile that's helping other people recover. That was an amazing hook to get people through the door and
Whoa.
for their donations.
Did you get a lot of people from the armed services coming, and did you get a lot of people saying, thank you for doing this? I remembered this. This has really done a lot of good for me.
Yeah, and that was a struggle for a lot of the guys. Having veterans in the room or serving members in the room, that wasn't a problem because we knew we could play with them. It was when we came out the door and they're actually giving us money and going, thank you for your service. And that was so powerful and that was so helpful. That really made the guys uncomfortable, but they had to take it. And I was saying to them, this is one of the most valuable lessons you will get about being a civilian now. You've been promoted to a civilian. We have to start learning how to take those compliments and live in the real world. We're no longer in uniform. We're not hidden behind a fence. Learn how to stand up on your own 2 feet in the real world. And this is going to age you.
Now, you said something that's very interesting, and I'm someone who knows nothing again, but why is it difficult for veterans to receive compliments? Because comedians, if you give, well, it's difficult for them to receive compliments because it
Yeah.
inflates the ego where they can't walk out the door. But like, what about why is it difficult for veterans?
When you're in service, it's all about humility. The only thing that exists is the mission. If you don't accomplish that mission, it's a failure. So you don't get thanked for completing the mission. You just go out and do your job. It's about basic humility. Nobody is more important than the other person. So when somebody comes up and if they thanked your regiment or your ship or your corps or that deployment, you can take it. When it comes to you personally, you've ended up doing decades of being humble. And suddenly hearing you as an individual get it, it feels wrong. We are so different to the Americans. The Americans in potential do it better. They love their armed forces so much. They love their veterans so much. They're used to saying the phrase, thank you for your service. I argue it's one of the reasons why we have so many problems with things like mental health issues, PTSD, moral injury syndrome, general anxiety disorder, imposter syndrome in the British military post-service,
Oh.
because we're not used to that. We are not used to it. It's against what we were trained to do. And this is why comedy is magical, because when somebody thanks me for a joke or thanks me for a routine or they laugh at something I've said, it's because I've given them something and I'm getting a reward for it rather than them thanking me for just doing my job. Comedy is such a beautiful, it's the best art form ever. You get thanked every single second you get it right. You give them something, they give you something back. And that's why comedy really helps veterans, especially those with psychiatric disabilities, so much.
And does it help them look at some of the challenges they face or traumatic incidents in a less serious way? And to
Yeah, that's the entire point of Project Comedy. We've got guys with every one of those disabilities I've listed before: moral injury syndrome, PTSD, general anxiety disorder, imposter syndrome, etc., etc., etc. All we do in Project Comedy is have a laugh. The mission is to make people laugh. Then we will talk about our disorders and how to live in life, but the only mission is to get out into the real world and make them giggle. So we don't have to spend 14 hours doing psychotherapy about why am I experiencing this from my trauma. We understand where you're coming from, mate. Now go and make him laugh. It's a
Mm.
beautiful way to transit from really dark. And sometimes I joke about my PTSD and moral injury syndrome all the time on the stage. That is the entire basis of my one man show I'm taking to Edinburgh. Is about I've got PTSD and I've got moral injury syndrome. But I laugh about it and remove the stigma and enable people to talk about it.
Mm. Yeah, that's a big thing, isn't it? I spoke to a former member of the Crips, and he says,
Mm-hmm.
like he used to joke about anything, and like what he used to do with horrible situations, like things that he didn't want to unleash his horrible feeling onto the world. He wanted to joke about it so that he could put positivity into the world rather than
Yeah,
unleash this poison that he's feeling.
yeah. There's so many parts about my PTSD and moral injury syndrome and the stuff I've seen and done that I would never take to the stage because it's not going to make anybody laugh. It's going to make them uncomfortable. They're going to be scared. But there's so many other parts that are just basically funny. So let's just get out and tell that side of it and stop people being scared about psychiatric disabilities and health. Let's have a damn good giggle and understand each other a little bit better. And it's the greatest part of my recovery by taking to the stage and talking about these things in a funny way.
What have been some of the greatest moments that you've witnessed through running Project Comedy in terms of like other acts and audience members where that really stand out to you? So I can tell you one from myself. This
Go on.
sounds weird, but a while ago when I run a comedy show, there was this guy that was, well, he had cancer and he was about to die. But this lady came up to us and said, "Thank you so much for everything you did. He really made his day, even though he was in pain." And he actually was a big,
Yeah,
memorable audience member that night.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Personally, myself as an individual act, and it keeps me motivated to keep Project Comedy running. Um, on 6 separate occasions now, I've finished a set, come off the stage, and I've got a hug from an audience member going, "That's the first time I've ever laughed about my PTSD." That's better than any paycheck I've ever got or the biggest round of applause. Those 6 individuals go in, I've actually found some kind of peace with my PTSD. That's magical. With what we've done with Project Comedy, how many different examples can I give you? I mean, there's a great mate of mine. I've known him for about 9 years. Um, he's really struggled. Um, for the last 6, 7 years, he has hardly ever left his house. But he spent 10 days with us at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, the biggest arts festival in the world. Did not want to be a comedian, but he wanted to be our tech guy and our photographer. And he was terrified he wouldn't do it. And he was a massive success. Took some of the most amazing photographs I could imagine. Was so helpful for us setting up the rooms. And he's determined to go back next year. This is a bloke that was hiding in his house for the previous 7 years. Yeah. What something as inconsequential as making people laugh can change people's lives so dramatically.
Hmm. And with what goes, so this is a thing that I've heard, and I don't know. I think this is true to some degree, but I don't know to the extent. But they say I was speaking to a former LAPD cop, and
Mm-hmm.
and I was looking at some survey online, and they said that the average person goes through maybe one or two traumatic incidents during their life. but they said that with a police officer, they go through maybe 10 a week or something. And what's the bit that I was getting at? Yeah. What I think there's definitely people who aren't soldiers or been in the armed services, I don't think understand what soldiers in the armed services go through across the world, and how can we be more empathetic? Because that's the question I get.
I think there's two parts to that. Number one, trauma is trauma is trauma is trauma. Doesn't matter if you suffer trauma in the military or you suffer trauma as a civilian. Any person that's been sexually assaulted is going to end up with trauma that will probably lead to PTSD. Servicemen in the military could end up with trauma because of very different things. Doesn't stop. There's not a hierarchy of whose trauma is worse, whose PTSD is worse. It doesn't exist. It's just the environment and where we operate as servicemen, we are being sent to very high threat areas. So it's likely you're going to encounter traumas more frequently. Now, 95% of the time, you're trained for that. We know what we're going to do, and we know the consequences of what we're going to do. So we can normally deal with it, and we talk about it, and we process it, and we'll speak to our chain of command, and we'll speak to our counselors, and we'll speak to our religious representatives. But regardless if you're religious or not, the chaplain or the padre is one of the nicest people to speak to because you can just mentally dump everything you've gone through. But sometimes those traumas are just so freaking high, it breaks your brain. And it literally is, it's not a mental health condition, PTSD. It's a psychiatric disability. Your brain is permanently rewired. So just a lot of the stuff we do, it's very, very uncomfortable, but we can cope with most of it because that's what we were trained to do. But sometimes you end up in situations that are just too brutal to be able to process and cope with. And then that's where I think it's my mission. I've got to turn around to servicemen and former service personnel to go, if you're struggling, start talking. Because I know what it did to my life. I mean, I'm really lucky. I have survived 7 suicide attempts. And then I really got into my comedy. And I'm so proud to say it's been over 3 years since the last time I tried to take my life. And it's been over 2 years since I last thought about it. There is light at the end of the tunnel if you start talking, do therapy, and find something that gives you joy.
What can civilians do in terms? No, I shouldn't say civilians. What can people who haven't been in the armed services do to, what are the things not to do and what are the things to do? Because I know that I watched a program a while ago, a movie about the American sniper, who was a guy that killed a lot of terrorists, and when he came back, he had PTSD, but they gave him a purpose where he was helping ex-armed services, but he got killed by one of them, and that was mad.
It's easier. I don't know how to say the stuff to do. I do know some things not to do. When you find out somebody was a serviceman, do not ask them, have you killed anybody? Because you could take them straight back to trauma. And it's a requirement of the job in certain combat roles and what have you, that's going to happen as part of your career. But you are literally sticking a hot knife into them. People think it's the most exciting question they could ever ask. You never know the damage you could cause that individual by asking that question. Asking them about their job is a good thing. Ask them about the job. What did you actually do in the services? Oh, where did you serve? But don't press on specifics.
With being in the military and all that, what would you say are the things that it gives you? Because I know, I think I said it earlier, maybe in the podcast, or I said it before the podcast. Jonathan Rowland said it really was a significant part of why he's a successful comedian in Sweden, and is that being in the armed services gives you military discipline in life, and that's what got him to where he is today.
I'm not certain. Certain parts it does aid me. Certain parts maybe it's a barrier. I turn up on time. I'm prepared. I communicate well. So many people in the industry don't twig onto how important relationships are in the stand-up comedy community. If you're booked for a gig, turn up. If they send you an email, reply. Um, Make sure you're prepared. You don't have demands on the day that the booker is not preparing. So that really aids me there. But sometimes I'm somewhat disconnected from civilian life because I spent 23 years in it in a very regimented, disciplined, inflexible place. So on the technical side of life, yeah, it can be a great aid. Sometimes material and connection with the audience, I'm going over the head. So I have to civvy it down to let them understand it. But as I said earlier, the biggest part that the military's given me is feel the fear and do it anyway. So that the opportunity to actually stand on the stage for the first time when I was terrified, the courage to try new material, the courage to risk telling that joke or interact with that audience member, you try.
And it's because you've faced tougher challenges in your as a in terms of emotions and difficulty mentally. You faced
Yeah,
harder challenges in the military than a lot of the times to
yeah.
stand up.
What's the worst an audience is going to do to me? Not laugh. Well, I'm terribly sorry. The last time I was shooting a rifle at somebody, they weren't laughing at me either.
Yes. Do you say that to the audience if they're a difficult one, or if they think they're big bollocks or something and they start heckling you? You say that to them?
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, I've got a couple of heckle put downs. I mean, I've had a couple of guys think they're the big I am, and I turned round and just stopped and just stood on stage silent. You do realise I've got complex post-traumatic stress disorder. After 23 years military service, I ended up leaving as a qualified infantier. Do you really think you're making me nervous, or do you want to leave before I do something damaging? And you just watch them shrink back into their chair. I'm going to shut the fuck up now for 5 minutes.
Hmm. So there's two questions that I want to talk about. How are they as audience members, the military? Because I know that Mr. C, who's a great comic, one of my favorite guests I've had on the podcast, he said he did a comedy show in America and it was for a military base. And he was, what was he doing? He was teasing a female audience member who was with her boyfriend, and
Yeah,
he was just flirting with her a bit. And the guy said, hey man, he got more and more serious. And then one guy said to him afterwards, what are you doing teasing this man's missus in front of him? You don't know what shit she's doing when he's in the armed services. And
yeah,
there was all sorts of things that could happen to you. And he
yeah,
took that as a big moment. He was like, wow, like he didn't see that point of view about
yeah.
the.
I mean, it depends what you're doing. So, for example, I've done military bases, I've done veterans associations. That's a completely different kind of audience. Yeah, I've got entirely serving personnel or former military personnel in front of me. I can play with them in a different way. I can play darker, I can play dirtier, but there are certain things I will never do. Never insult their core, never insult their partners. That is the camaraderie. You're not insulting my brothers. Yeah, you can insult my commanding officer, fine dandy, because that's part of the joke. Yeah, the commanding officer has to be a dickhead. We've got to enjoy having a laugh with that. If you've got servicemen in a city gig, they will be probably not the quietest, but the most respectful people in that audience. They will laugh their bits off, but they won't heckle. They're not going to try and be the big I am because that's the way they're trained. We're in public. We've got to represent the military. I tend to find most of the time that they were veterans after the gig or their service personnel after the gig. Love that. Currently work with 4-1. But what? Why didn't you tell me? It's like, I was in 4-2 Commando for it's so many years. Should have said that when I was on the stage. I could have had a laugh at you, bootneck. But they won't because they're representing their service when they're there.
Yeah, and the thing is, you never know who's been in the military. People are just people at the end of the day. But one of the
90%
things
of the
that is
time,
completely
90% of the
crazy.
time, 90% of the time, you can actually spot a serviceman or a veteran in the audience because we've got
Oh,
certain ways we sit, certain ways we'll look around the room, certain tattoos, certain haircuts.
oh,
Um, you, you can spot them. You can spot them, but you never reveal them because that's breaking Brotherhood code. If they want to say,
oh,
"Yeah,
okay,
I was I was RAF, I was," that you don't break the brother code, even if you. And when I say the brother code,
okay.
it could be a female serviceman in front of me and what have you. You don't break the code unless they want it broken.
Ah, okay. But yeah, but that's a secret in the Brotherhood. You won't, you can't say like how they sit or how they talk. That's a secret.
In fact,
No
I
worries,
don't
we'll
know what
keep it
job they're
secret.
doing at that. Because how could I know what job they're doing at that moment? Maybe they're doing something sensitive, covert, something like that, or they may be doing a job that is politically sensitive. So why am I going to place them in danger if I go, I can tell straight away you're a cavalry officer because I can spot them a mile off. But I'm not going to do it because I'm not going to jeopardize their personal security.
Hmm. Let's see. Yeah. It's like one of those things when you're in a certain industry a while, there's little things you pick up because you've been trained to
Yeah.
pick up on it.
Yes.
What one thing that I've seen a lot of on TikTok and Instagram, social media, and I've even seen a short film on this where they in America. I hope it's not a big thing in here, but I've seen a lot of things in America where you have this stolen valor, where a lot of people dress up as soldiers to get like
Yes.
freebies, like a cheaper laptop or a cheaper. They don't do that
Yeah.
here, do they? Bloody hell! Hope not.
Oh yeah. For the first time ever, a bloke was arrested this Remembrance Day. He turned up at a Remembrance Day event
Oh,
wearing the uniform of a rear admiral and medals he could never have. So he
fuck.
was, and he's got no connection to the services, and he was arrested. Yes, it does happen. It's not as common. In fact, there's an entire Facebook page dedicated to it called Water Mitty Hunters, and we will find people that are
Fuck.
pretending to have service without having served in the number of guys that have come up to me and gone, "Yeah, I was in the SAS." Get to stop. I have worked alongside the SAS. They would never say that in service or post service.
Ah.
They would never say. But when I was in Edinburgh, I had at least 20 people come up and went, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I used to be in the SAS." Get to hell, you
Fucking
muppet.
hell. Well, you wouldn't want people to know that because it invites trouble, doesn't it?
And they were,
It's not
these are
something.
special forces that are very good at being secret. They're not going to reveal it. It's against what they were trained to
Yes,
do. They're not going to reveal it.
I saw a program on the SES a while ago, and it was showing these 4 or 5 SES men in. I think it was in. Was it where was it? I think it was in Libya, and they all. He asked the reporter or the journalist, "Who here is a Britishman?" And they all look like they weren't British. They look like they were Arabic. And then he says, "No, they're all British men."
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, when you work with UK Special Forces, all branches of our Special Forces are fantastic. But the main thing they do is blend in. They blend in. They are not going to look like Reacher from Prime Video. How's he going to walk down the streets of Mogadishu and not be pigging spotted? They blend in. It's the entire point of our special forces.
Yeah, yeah. But I will say this one thing though. If it's a professional fight, a lot of times they have big ears. So I mean, never mind. That's completely irrelevant. Ignore that. Sorry, Jay.
I was going to say that's
I
what
just
my service. Unless they played rugby, then they'd have big ears if they played rugby.
yeah. But if you had the cauliflower ears, you probably wouldn't make a good Secret Serviceman, would you? No.
There you go. There you go. You're standing out a bit.
No, it's. Does it feel? When you get someone who's not been armed service like myself, you get all the same questions. You're like, bloody hell, I've heard this again, and it's the same thing with comedy. A lot of people think they're being new and interesting. They ask questions they've said 1,000 times before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's sort of like, as I said, the one question never to ask: have you killed anybody? Uh, um, Yeah, and a lot of people. I'm staggered in the UK as an island nation. They don't understand what our armed forces do and how they're structured, and they completely forget it. So why have you got a Royal Navy? Have you ever spotted the UK as an island nation? We've got this big stuff around us called big blue wobbly stuff that mermaids live in, called the freaking sea. We need ships there. We're not Switzerland surrounded by other countries. We need a Royal Navy. Um, Yet sometimes the ignorance of the public can be a little bit, really? Okay. Um, but yeah, 80% of the time, most people come up with genuine interest. And I'd say about 60% of the time, they come up with respect. So, yeah, and especially me talking about having been in the services, for decades. After the show, they're really respectful and go, "Oh, I never knew that, and I never understood this, and thanks for talking about that." So, yeah, I tend to get quite a nice reaction off my audiences about it.
Yeah, right. And it's something that a lot of people have never witnessed and intrigued by.
Excuse me. Sorry about that, mate. I decided to inhale
It's
my
all right.
water rather than drink it then. Um,
It's all
I'll
right.
pause so you can edit it out. Um, yeah, so many audiences are just genuinely interested because it's something they've never encountered before. They don't have service members in their family. They're not connected to the First World War, the Second World War, the Falklands War, and what have you. And suddenly being presented with somebody that is got connection to that, including Iraq and Afghanistan and the other bits and pieces we've done. Suddenly, genuine curiosity comes out, and that's delightful.
Hmm. There's you mentioned something earlier on the podcast, and you said that in America there's a lot more love and support for the armed services than there is here. That's
Yeah,
really that's really sad to hear, man. Why is it like that here? That's mad. These are
I
people who
think
fought for the country, defended us.
Um, the American culture is so different. The American culture is built around individual success. That is the entire point of their nation. Everybody could become the president. Everybody could become a billionaire. We live in the UK. Not everybody can become the king. Yeah, we've got that subtle difference there. The second part is we are very humble as Brits. We may not appear it when we're talking to each other down the pub and what have you, but we don't brag. We don't brag as much as Americans will do, because Americans will brag lots, but that's their culture. Is I must amplify every one of my successes to prove what kind of person I am. And but they've also got that level of humility of, but I couldn't do that job. I couldn't do the job of that sailor. I couldn't do that job of that airman. I couldn't do that job of that marine, etc., etc. It's they place them on a pedestal of I do all these amazing things for myself, but I'm not putting my life on the line to do it. But we're very humble in the UK. So even though you do 2, 3 decades in the military, you never think you're the big I am. And when you leave, I just did my job. Um, and I actually now think as society evolves, that's something we need to fix. We should be celebrating these people because they end up in really dangerous situations, traumatic situations. We need them to know they're appreciated so they can actually go, I'm struggling, I need help, and stop them being statistics. In the last 3 years, I've lost 9 mates to suicide. That's not good enough.
Fuck.
We should be turning around and going, I really appreciate everything you've done. Start talking and we'll help you. And that's one of my missions with Project Comedy and why I personally take the stage and talk about the things I do.
Hmm. That's just shit. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. Just fucking hell. That's just
It's just a
fucked up.
terrifying statistic, but it's yeah, just patting somebody on the shoulder and going, "Well done, mate." That can make that can make the difference between a day when they want to hurt themselves to a day where they go, "I'm going to try again tomorrow."
So could a simple, if you notice someone serving the armed forces and you just say, "Thank you, mate. Thank you for what you've done for our country," that would mean a lot to that person.
They will cringe. They will cringe, but
Oh,
then they'll
sorry.
walk up and they're not instantly. I mean, I've had to learn how to say thank you for your support because it was the last thing I wanted to say at the time. But you know why it makes a difference? They will cringe, but they'll walk away and it'll be in their brain for the next 10, 15 minutes going, they actually appreciate what I did. So make them cringe.
Okay.
Make them cringe and go, thank you.
But that bit's also a big British thing. We don't like to boast too much,
Totally. Totally.
as you said.
That is part of the British psyche. But we need to break that to make sure people stay safe.
Yeah. Now, to anyone that's listening in right now, what would you say are the biggest lessons you've learned from being in the armed service, setting up Project Comedy, and being a comedian? And what advice would you give to someone that's from the armed service looking to be creative, or someone that's a general comedian?
Um, Never forget you're allowed to be creative. Just because you wore a uniform and you act uniformly, you followed orders and what have you, your creative part of yourself should be encouraged because that makes you a better person. In service and post service, go out there, be creative. I do it in the form of stand-up comedy. I love it because it's instant feedback, and my only job is to make people have a good time. That is the only function of being a stand-up comedian. I'll recommend it to anybody that's been in law enforcement, firefights, or military service. Go and do freaking comedy because you're actually seeing happiness rather than the darker sides of life. So go out and expose yourself to light and laughter and enjoy yourself. Um, Anybody out there with a military background, serving or veterans, if you want some support, Google Project Comedy. Go to our website, message us, and we'll chuck our arms around you and we'll show you what we're doing. We're allowed to give full training and what have you. And if you're not wanting to stand on the stage, still join us. Come and have a good laugh, and we may be able to point you in a creative outlet that you're going to enjoy. Just feel the fear and do it anyway.
And what's the other thing? Yeah. Uh, what do you love about people in comedy, and what do you love about people in the military?
Um, Comedians have a lot in common with military personnel because you're not normal if you're a stand-up comedian, and there's nothing normal about the people that join the military. We're all a little bit special. Um, and it's also the joy of every single walk of life joins the military, and every single walk of life becomes a stand-up comedian. Doesn't matter what color you are, what creed you are, what religion, what sexual
Yeah.
orientation, what have you. Everybody's in stand-up comedy, and that's the same people that walk through the door when they join the military. It's a collection of weirdos going to do one thing. In the military, it's to wear a uniform and inflict violence on the enemy to protect our nation. In comedy, it's to inflict funny on the people in front of us. Um, and you want to see it yourself. 99.9% of the stand-up comedy community are just really supportive and lovely people and will look after you. I find
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I would hide on my boat all the time and never speak to anybody if I didn't have stand-up. I go to a pub or I go to a club and make people laugh for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever gig I've been booked in for. And the first people I start speaking to are my fellow comedians and I start having a good time. And then I start speaking to the audience and I have a better time. Yeah, that's the magic. That's the magic.
Okay. And for anyone that's listening right now, how do they find out about you and Project Comedy?
Project Comedy, Google Project Comedy. You'll find us there. You'll find our website, projectcomedy.co.uk. To find me personally, best way to find me is via TikTok, because that seems to be where I've got the biggest following. So if you go to TikTok and look up comic Jay Saunders, so it's the letter J, comic, the letter J, Saunders, and as you pointed out, with a U in it. I've not got the world's biggest TikTok following, but if you go there, it's got links to all my other social media channels, plus all the missions I care about, like Forces Veterans Afloat, Project Recce, Project Comedy. You'll find all of my links via TikTok.
Okay. Well, guys, I hope you've enjoyed Jay. It's definitely been very informative for someone like me who knows nothing. But yeah, it's been great. We've got a great guest coming up next. He's going to inform me about the world of ventriloquism and comedy. I'm not too sure what guests I'm going to get on next, but I think I'm going to try and get a musical comedian and mime artist who did the Edinburgh Fringe. And I think these are what I'm going to try. And I'm going to try and get, I think I'm going to focus more on the comedy club side of comedy. But yeah, hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys soon. All right. Thanks for coming on, Jay. That was an absolutely awesome chat.